Puran Appu has come a long way since young Francisco stood up to the Gamulla Dani of Moratuwa. He now leads one of the most promising revolutions in Ceylon since the tragedy of Uvavellassa in 1817. Here stands a man, shoulder to shoulder with other brave men and women, determined to crush the most powerful empire in the world, armed with almost nothing but their own will. By now, the bounty on Puran Appu's head is set at £100 by Attorney General Bulla. He is joined by other civilian agitators including the ever-present Kongale Godabanda and leading civil icons like Karo Appu and Dinis, his comrades in revolution. The Buddhist clergy, as always, is encouraging resistance through sermons and extending protection to civilian leaders, hoping that the defense of Buddhism provides inspiration to raise the banner of rebellion. It is time for Puran Appu to plan an assault. He sends Gongale Godabanda with a small army on a route through Pallepattuwa, while Puran Appu, Karo Appu, Dinis and their men take another through Kaudupalalla. The goal is to meet in Matale, having recruited as many able-bodied men as possible to the cause, and then launch a series of surprise attacks that would leave the British with little time to react. The men number a few thousands, but have neither training, adequate nutrition, weapons, nor armor. They carry pitchforks, scythes, and a few rusty rifles to the fight against the British army that will surely have muskets. 2 days later, and it is the 28th of July 1848, the first attack is planned on the coffee plantations of Veera. Bonfires are lit and rebels seize British property, destroying what they can and taking up camp in the plantations and jungles. It does not take the British long to realize they are under attack. They muster their forces and retaliate. 2 battalions of soldiers are dispatched to Veera to quell the disturbance. The Ceylon Rifle Brigade gather at the plantations with 100 men, led by 4 officers. The 15th Regiment brings this number to 200. The soldiers surround the plantations. A.G. Buller sends word urging the soldiers not to engage and instead for the officers to try to come up to an agreement with the rebels. But this does not come to pass. The rebels press on, and the Ceylon Rifle Brigade starts firing. The soldiers move into the jungle where the natives have positioned themselves. With no effective weapons, the rebels are forced into close combat and fight with their fists against all odds. They are defeated, with over 200 Sinhalese casualties. The Battle of Veera would go down in history as a sharp reminder of the brutality employed by the British military on poorly armed insurgents. The employment of Malay soldiers who fought with a curved and serrated dagger called kris was considered to be particularly violent. Records show that a British Malay soldier known as Jemadar took great pleasure in killing peasants for sport. So much so that an officer, Captain Henderson, had to remind his men that these were peasants they were fighting. Overall, the unprepared rebellion was quelled. Inside plantation warehouses, they found more rebels drunk to the teeth on expensive European liquor. The British now have wind of an organized uprising, and a martial law is declared in Kandy town. 29th of July 1848. A rebel group of 3,000 launches an assault on Matale, but the odds are heavily in favor of the British. Again. A short shootout ensues with the rebels' rusty guns, and the overpowered insurgents retreat to DAMBULLA. Even with the rebels gone, British soldiers in Matale continue to destroy peasant property. By now they have learned of the Veera standoff and believe they are under attack. They even plunder and auction traditional artifacts in Buddhist temples in vengeance. That night, as British soldiers set up camp on the hills of Matale, a devastated city lay about them. Under them are Sinhalese who are willing to fight the insurgency. One of these is Poravalla Baddilekam. He spies for the British and has information about the rebellion's next move. To legitimize their uprising, the rebels will crown a new king and a monarchy will be reappointed. 30th of July 1848. A coronation is planned in the temple of DAMBULLA, with over 800 present at an appointed time. Under these auspices, Gongale Godabanda is crowned the new Sinhalese king. He will be known as Sri Vikrama Sarvasiddhapa. Palle Bandara is appointed second in command. Puran Appu is officially appointed commander. These are the 3 shining lights of the revolution. Puran Appu sends a group under the command of his best friends Karu Appu and Dinis west to Kurunegala. Their mission is to rescue captured Sinhala rebels and steal money from the district secretariat house. But British soldiers sniff out the ambush and by daybreak they breach Kurunegala, meeting the rebels with their overwhelming firepower. Karu Appu and Dinis survive with a few others. More looting by the British. More auctioning of artifacts. Martial law is extended indefinitely and the British come down hard. What follows are dark days for those who concocted a brave but ineffective plan to reclaim their land. The movement was founded on peasants' knowledge of navigating the island through lesser-known paths, but most importantly, a network based on trust. But local chieftains or the Korale Mahatyo of different regions respond to the many generous rewards that the British put out for information that lead to the capture of rebels. Palle Bandara, second in command to the throne, plans a move from their stronghold in Bambava Temple to Lunukadavella Temple to recruit more troops. But the chief of Darativava near the Lunukadavella Temple is in the British pockets. He is instructed to send his men to pose as recruits. They appear so enthusiastic that Palle Bandara even posts them as night guards outside his tent. But come midnight, they send word of their location and Palle Bandara is arrested. After a brief trial, he is shot and his body hangs on a tree for 4 days. This message has its intended effect. Fever join up and many leave the cause. But there are 2 lights still burning. The real prizes are Puran Appu and Gongalegoda Banda. The British know their capture will bring the rebellion to a screeching halt and crush any simmering hopes the peasantry might yet have. But for weeks they have been at large. Pallame Kumure Basnayaka Nilame, a local chief, meets with Agent Bulla, a rebel hunter, to offer him Gongalegoda Banda, captured alive in return for riches and land. Bulla agrees. The Nilame begins his search and comes across a cave where a monk named Kudapula Unnanse resides in peace. Suspecting the monk could be protecting Gongalegoda Banda, he sends word to Bulla, but when Bulla arrives with soldiers, he finds nothing. To save himself from Bulla's wrath, Basnayaka Nilame accuses Kudapula Unnanse of aiding the rebels. The monk is tried by court-martial and he is sentenced to be shot. The Queen's advocate, H.C. Selby, considers the evidence insufficient for a conviction, let alone for the sentence, and begs the governor for a reprieve. But Torrington refuses it in strong language, which he later regrets, and the monk is shot. The brutality of the crackdown begins to wear on the administration. It is reported that the Chief Justice threatened to resign if one more man was shot. The British finally get a break when a peasant arrives at the McDowell stronghold, led by Captain Watson. This is the very peasant who is sending food to Gongalegoda Banda in secret. Gongalegoda Banda is captured in the middle of his meal. Upon his capture, he gives up the names and locations of his comrades, and instead of being hanged, he is given 100 lashes and exiled to Malaysia where he dies of a stomach disease within the year. As the lone last light of the rebellion, Puran Appu goes into hiding to locations known only to his closest comrades. And on the 7th of August 1848, he is visited by 7 of his most trusted friends, including Hevakuruge and Baddage Alves. They quietly celebrate their reunion well into the night, mournful of those they have lost in the fight. But before dawn, his friends will have handed him over, and even the British were surprised at such treachery. Immediately upon capture, the most notorious rebel of Matale is handed a death sentence. At 2:30 p.m. on the 8th of August 1848, on the banks of the Bogambara River, Francisco Fernando, known to all as Puran Appu, is sentenced to be shot by firing squad. As the high noon sun reflects on the musket barrels, Puran Appu remembers how all those years ago he stood up to a local official as a teenage boy. Ever since then, his sense of justice and patriotism had only sharpened, and now here he was, at the final cut. The executioner inquires, "Do you have any last words?" He takes a breath, raises his arm to the sky, and speaks with a hint of heartbreak in his voice. These words would later be included in the governor's final report on the rebellion to the Secretary of the Colonies back in London. Puran Appu's agitation brings much-needed light into the activities of the local government of Ceylon. Dr. Christopher Eliot, who saved the lives of thousands by interrupting a planned march in Colombo, together with other prominent British residents, sent word of the government's arbitrary brutality. Governor Torrington is considered a laughingstock back at home and is even mocked by Benjamin Disraeli in Parliament. But being well connected, is spared the indignity of being recalled. Instead, in the dead of night, he quietly packs his belongings and vacates Queen's house in Colombo. After his death, Veera Puran Appu, or Heroic Puran Appu, as he would be immortalized in Sri Lanka, was paid a high tribute by his own enemy, Governor Torrington, who wrote to the Colonial Secretary in his report, "I remind you of the last words of Puran Appu. He held up his hand and said, 'If there had been half a dozen such men as me to lead, there would not be a white man living in the Kandyan provinces. This is true. If there had been such leaders, without doubt, for a time, we should have lost the country.'" This has been the story of Veera Puran Appu, the rebel of Matale. Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to our Patreon members for their continued support. Make sure to like, subscribe and hit that bell button to get notified of new episodes.